Anime, Classroom for Heroes. In this first episode, we are shown two figures engaged in a battle in a desolate land. They are a hero and a demon king who will determine the fate of this world. The demon king chants a meteor spell aimed at the hero. Meanwhile, the hero merely takes a small stone and throws it with all his might using magic. The small stone successfully shatters the giant meteor into pieces. The hero asks the demon king to fight seriously. The demon king agrees to end this battle immediately. He unleashes his full power to attack. Meanwhile, the hero uses his ultimate move, the Dragon Annihilator, a technique that destroys dragons with 5 swords. Their movements are so fast and powerful that they even cause the surrounding land to crumble. Despite fighting with their full strength, both of them remain undefeated. However, they are now extremely exhausted. The hero's black hair has turned white. In the end, they continue to advance, gasping for breath, and they stab each other's bodies. Thus, both of them fall down. The scene then shifts to a castle that serves as an academy. There is a boy dressed differently from the others. The boy has unusual hair, with the right side white and the left side black. The boy is impressed by the students greeting each other. He is determined to find friends and become ordinary. Apparently, the boy is a transfer student. In the school hallway, the boy greets every student he sees. Some students are curious about him, and the boy approaches them quickly. He introduces himself to them. His name is Blade. The 4 students that Blade approached also introduce themselves. There's Kasim, Clay, Jessica, and Claire. Blade says he came here to find friends. Claire offers the 4 of them to become his friends. Blade is overjoyed because he has successfully made 4 friends. His goal is to have 100 friends. Soon, a girl with red hair approaches Blade because he is being too noisy. The girl is Arnest Flaming, one of the top-ranking students commonly referred to as Empress. Blade doesn't care about that and instead introduces himself to Arnest as well. Arnest becomes angry, especially since Blade's face looks unfamiliar. Claire explains that Blade is a transfer student. However, Arnest does not believe it. Rosewood Academy is a special school for people who want to become heroes and protect the world. It's impossible for a student to join in the middle of the semester. Blade says that he doesn't care much about being a hero, he just wants to find friends. Arnest becomes even angrier upon hearing this. Then, Blade suddenly remembers that he has to meet the headmaster. He asks Arnest to take him there reluctantly. They finally arrived in front of the headmaster's office door. As they entered, Arnest immediately knelt down, not expecting to see the figure before her. Blade simply stood and spoke familiarly with that person. The man standing before them was the king of this kingdom. Blade himself already knew that the man was the king. The king said that he had heard a lot about Arnest from the previous headmaster. As he stated, from now on, the king would be the headmaster of this academy. Upon hearing this, Arnest praised him, honored to be taught directly by a great warrior. However, for now, the king only had business with Blade. He asked Arnest to leave the room. When they were outside, Arnest became angry again because Blade was acting familiar with the king. In fact, Blade himself didn't know why the king was there. The king said he wanted Blade's power to return. However, Blade just wanted to be an ordinary person. The king even went as far as changing the academy's curriculum. Blade felt that it was unnecessary. Besides, the demon king was no longer there. According to the king's report, the powers of the hero and the demon king were lost when they exchanged attacks. However, the king believed that his power could rise again. A few moments later, Blade met Arnest again. He wondered why Blade was here when this was the arena for the top-ranking class. It turned out that after taking the lower-ranking class exam, Blade was told to come here. He even showed his top-ranking class emblem. Arnest clearly didn't believe that a transfer student suddenly entered the top-ranking class. Arnest accused him of bribing or using a backdoor entrance. Setting aside those accusations, Blade, as usual, introduced himself to everyone present. Arnest was angry because he wasn't being listened to. However, Blade said that he was listening while patting Arnest's head. Because of that, Arnest became embarrassed and swung her sword. Blade was able to easily dodge her attack, but the impact of the attack was powerful enough to erode the arena wall. Shortly after, a girl with white hair approached Blade and Arnest to inform them that class was about to begin. Blade introduced himself once again. The girl was unsure of how to react. According to Arnest, she just needed to introduce herself in return. The girl agreed and introduced herself as Sophie. Still feeling uncertain, Arnest asked the teacher for permission to test Blade's abilities before the lesson began. Arnest wanted to test him by attacking magical metal. According to Arnest, everyone in the top-ranking class could scratch the magical metal. So, Blade had to make a stronger impact if he wanted to be recognized in this class. Arnest said that the top-ranking class existed in a different dimension. Blade asked back how many dimensions were different. Arnest didn't expect Blade to ask that, so she simply answered randomly, saying 3 dimensions. Blade then knew what technique he would use. The other students recognized the stances created by Blade. Then, Blade used the Dragon Eater, a technique that destroys dragons with 2 swords. Not only did he scratch the metal, but the attacked magical metal also completely shattered. His attack continued, destroying part of the arena wall. After witnessing his ability, Arnest became curious about who Blade really was. He answered that he was just an ordinary person, and that was one of the reasons he came to this academy. During lunch break, Blade approached Arnest, who was eating alone. Blade invited others to sit at their table, but they hesitated because Arnest was there. It seemed that she was feared by other students. Despite that, Blade thanked Arnest. As a transfer student, Blade felt grateful to have found a friend like Arnest. Arnest herself did not expect to be seen that way by him. However, Blade said that they were friends, especially since they were eating together. Arnest became shy and accepted Blade's statement. It was already nighttime, and Arnest had just returned to her room. Earlier, Arnest seemed to disregard Blade's words. However, when she was alone, she was actually overjoyed because it was the first time she had made a friend. While she was feeling happy, Arnest suddenly felt a great fire from within her. Unable to control it, she immediately fainted. Blade took her to the academy's infirmary. When they arrived, the nurse there said it was beyond her capabilities. She could handle ordinary illnesses or injuries, but dealing with magical diseases or curses was different. Sometime later, Arnest finally regained consciousness. Blade helped her walk because she was still weak. However, when they reached a group of other students, Arnest insisted on walking alone. In addition, she asked Blade not to tell anyone that she had fainted. Later that night, Blade went to a room that appeared to be secret. There were many robot guards there, but Blade defeated them all. Afterward, he opened a door by inserting a crystal. The door led to a modern room that looked like a database. Blade searched for information about something in Rosewood Academy, specifically information about Arnest's sword, Asmodeus. After obtaining the desired information, he planned to talk to Arnest the next day. Blade revealed that he knew the secret of Arnest's sword. The sword had its own consciousness and could grant great power to its owner. However, currently, Arnest was an imperfect owner. Blade asked why her condition was like that. Reluctantly, Arnest had to tell him. When she was 6 years old, she touched the cursed magic sword kept by the Flaming family. The bloodthirsty will of the sword tried to take over her body. Since then, Arnest had always resisted it. Her hair, which was originally black, turned red because of it. Even now, Arnest still often heard whispers from Asmodeus, but Asmodeus itself did not control her. Arnest knew there was a way to solve this problem, which was to convince the sword that she was its rightful owner. However, Arnest was worried that a bloodthirsty demon would be born if she failed. If that were to happen, Blade said he would defeat the demon. Moreover, he believed that Arnest would succeed. After that, Arnest challenged the sword, Asmodeus, to establish a pact. For that, she had to be tested first. A fire tornado formed around Arnest. Currently, Arnest was fighting Asmodeus mentally. Outside the tornado, fire demons started causing havoc. However, they were no match for Blade. Meanwhile, Arnest was determined to win, especially after being trusted by Blade. The fire tornado grew bigger, but it did not intimidate Blade at all. He believed that Arnest could pass her test. Shortly after, the fire tornado vanished, and Arnest fell from it. She stood up again and successfully conquered the Asmodeus sword. After overcoming her long-standing problem, Arnest slightly changed her appearance and became more cheerful. Other students were even more amazed by her presence. This is the end of episode 1. Continuing to episode 2, Blade is currently sparring with 2 students simultaneously. However, he keeps evading their attacks and appears not to take the fight seriously. Observing this, Arnest reprimands Blade, stating that it is impolite to avert one's gaze during a fight. However, instead of responding to Arnest's advice, Blade becomes distracted, feeling that Arnest seems somewhat different. Nevertheless, when asked what is different, Blade has no idea at all. Arnest becomes slightly disappointed that Blade doesn't notice her hair. Afterward, since Blade is feeling bored at the moment, Arnest asks him to supervise Sophie's training. For some reason, Sophie has always been training alone. When given an order, she will indeed obey. However, Sophie has never done anything according to her own desires. Interestingly, the other day Sophie mentioned her own name to Blade. So, perhaps Blade can help her. Subsequently, Blade approaches Sophie and tells her that he came because Arnest instructed him to. Sophie asks if it was an order. Blade becomes somewhat confused about how to respond, but essentially, he wants to assist Sophie. However, Sophie says she can only fight barehanded because that's the only thing she was taught. Blade is willing to teach her sword techniques, not as an order, but because he considers her a friend. Since it's not an order, Blade won't force her. Sophie doesn't seem to mind this offer. However, just as Blade is about to start, the bell for break time rings. In the next lesson, they finally get to practice swordsmanship together. In the first attempt, Sophie is unable to even scratch the enchanted metal and gets thrown back. Blade asks her to focus her energy on the sword and consider it as an extension of her body. After that, Blade demonstrates by effortlessly slicing through the enchanted metal as if it were paper. With that somewhat ambiguous explanation, somehow Sophie manages to understand it. After a few hours, Sophie is now able to strike the enchanted metal with the sword without any issues. With that, Blade concludes their training for now. Suddenly, Sophie asks if by doing this, she can defeat Arnest. Honestly, Blade is not sure either. If it's just these techniques alone, it seems challenging. Then, she throws her sword and assumes a mount position towards Blade, stating that this technique is much stronger. Although she says so, Sophie mentions that she wants to be taught something new the next day. Blade is currently in the school's headmaster's office, asking about Blade's school life. The headmaster is glad to hear that Blade has friends, considering Blade has been a hero since the age of 3. The headmaster asks Blade about the name of his friend. There are actually several people, but Blade responds that he has been hanging out with Sophie lately. The headmaster already suspected that Blade would be interested in her. The headmaster mentions that Sophie is very strong, and Blade agrees. However, it turns out that Sophie is still not perfect. According to the headmaster, if she were perfect, her abilities would surpass Blade's. Blade doesn't understand what the headmaster means by that. The headmaster suspects that Blade already knows that Sophie is the subject of the artificial hero project. The project leaders believed that they could create someone equivalent to a hero. Using forbidden techniques lost in the past, they used human forms as a basis to create artificial hero abilities. Furthermore, they duplicated it repeatedly and enhanced its abilities. Sophie's full name is Sophidia Femto. Femto itself means 12. In other words, Sophie is currently the 12th duplication. All this time, Sophie has been treated as a research subject. Nevertheless, the headmaster assures Blade not to worry because he has destroyed the organization. While saving Sophie, the headmaster declared that Sophie is now free. However, Sophie simply asks if it is an order. The headmaster is confident that Sophie continues to behave that way until now. After hearing all that, Blade immediately leaves the room to find Sophie. He believes that Sophie's suffering is caused by her existence. He wants to restore Sophie's normal life. Unfortunately, Blade himself doesn't know what normal looks like. Firstly, Blade meets the nurse at the health center and asks what is considered normal for young people his age. The nurse teases him a bit, saying she will teach him the beauty of youth. However, Blade quickly assumes that youth is the answer. Next, he goes to Leonard to ask about the meaning of youth. Leonard himself is also confused about how to answer, but when discussing youth, love is undoubtedly the answer. Just like before, Blade immediately assumes that love is the answer. Then, Blade asks Claire and Jessica about the meaning of love. They didn't expect Blade to ask such a question. With some embarrassment, Claire answers that love usually involves dating. Once again, Blade jumps to the conclusion that dating is the answer. Lastly, he goes to Arnest's room and asks what dating means and what should be done. Arnest answers that typical dating activities involve having a conversation, strolling around the city, and going shopping. However, Arnest misunderstands that Blade is asking her out on a date. Satisfied with the answer, Blade leaves Arnest and says he is going on a date. Arnest is confused, but then she realizes that Blade wants to ask someone else out on a date. Without any shame, Blade barges into the women's changing room and straightforwardly asks Sophie out on a date. As usual, Sophie asks if it is an order. Of course, it is not an order. Blade considers it to be something very important. Sophie agrees to go on a date with him. The next day, Blade arrives early at the designated meeting place and is currently waiting for Sophie. From a distance, Arnest, Claire, and Jessica are observing Blade. The clock strikes exactly 10 o'clock, and Sophie arrives on time. Blade has learned a lot in preparation for this day. He has even written down a minute-by-minute schedule of activities. Arnest and the others feel that his plan is too detailed, more like a mission than a date. As Blade reads his plan for too long, he ends up messing up his own schedule by a few minutes. Sophie suggests that they just leave right away. Unexpectedly, they hold each other's arms like a couple. Arnest feels that their actions are too indecent. However, Jessica thinks it's still normal. Amidst the commotion, they lose track of Blade and Sophie. During their date, Blade and Sophie walk around the city, eat ice cream together, and enjoy the view from a bridge. On the bridge, there's an attraction where they can feed the fish. Sophie expresses her interest in trying it. They buy a box of fish food and pour it all into the river. Unbeknownst to them, the food falls on Arnest, Claire, and Jessica, who are hiding underwater. Later, they go to an arcade. There, they choose to play a boxing game. However, their strength is too powerful, and the game machine immediately breaks. Blade and Sophie simply leave afterward. Arnest and the others apologize to the arcade owner for Blade and Sophie's actions. Next, they arrive at a cafe and order drinks with couple-like straws. As they start sipping their drinks, Sophie asks Blade to come closer because she's having trouble sipping. Blade leans in until their cheeks touch. They are completely unaware that Arnest, Claire, and Jessica are at the next table. And of course, Arnest, witnessing the intimacy between Blade and Sophie, feels extremely embarrassed to the point of almost going insane. Unbeknownst to them, Blade and Sophie have once again disappeared from there. After that, they proceed to the next item on their schedule. Unfortunately, they are running a bit late from the predetermined time. Sophie suggests taking a shortcut instead. They then swiftly jump from one building to another. The sun has set, and they have reached their final destination, the legendary fountain. Blade heard about this place from others, but he doesn't understand what makes it legendary. Sophie feels the same way. Sophie smiles slightly and mentions that today has been very enjoyable. However, she wonders why Blade went through all this trouble. With a serious expression, Blade answers that it's because Sophie is his friend. Sophie has heard that friends don't keep secrets. This statement causes Blade to panic a bit. However, Sophie meant that she herself still has secrets. Sophie finally opens up and reveals her story. She explains that she is different from regular humans. She was born as an artificial hero. An imperfect research subject. Sophie was bestowed with the power of an artificial hero. She demonstrates this by touching a staircase, causing it to twist like a worm. Just like a genuine hero's power, Sophie can defy the laws of physics. Another example is her ability to manipulate gravity and time. However, her control is not perfect. Currently, Sophie can only use her power for 10 seconds. Her full name is Sophidia Femto. In other words, she is the 12th duplication of a girl named Sophidia. The final experiment of the Artificial Hero Project. After hearing Sophie reveal all her secrets, Blade also wants to disclose his secret. Blade confesses that he is the hero. More precisely, a former hero. He has lost his powers now. Since their first meeting, Sophie has always felt something familiar within Blade. Blade apologizes for everything Sophie has experienced and assures her that he doesn't mind if she hates him. After all, Sophie was born with that cursed power because of the existence of the hero. Truthfully, Blade himself never desired to be a hero. However, because he could save many people, he felt compelled to do so. He has been fighting since the age of 3. Although he hasn't always been successful in saving others, people would get angry if someone couldn't be saved. Sophie immediately embraces Blade, who is shedding tears. Sophie recounts that after being saved by the king, she wanted to find her true self. During that time, she saw many people and cities that were helped by the hero. Sophie asks Blade to take more pride in his accomplishments. Blade feels that it's impossible. Sophie doesn't force Blade, but it's clear that she is proud to be born as an artificial hero. She even wants to become like Blade. After hearing all of this, Blade accepts himself as a hero and no longer regrets it. Holding hands, they make a promise that this secret is only for the two of them. This is the end of episode 2. Continuing with episode 3, as usual, Blade was enjoying a large portion of curry. Arnest reminded him not to eat messily. Sophie then wiped Blade's mouth without hesitation, which made Arnest embarrassed. Thanks to the incident from yesterday, Claire and Jessica became closer to Arnest. They even wanted to have a meal together. Not only the two of them, but Kasim and Clay also joined for the meal. For some reason, the four of them were not wearing their usual uniforms. Jessica asked Blade for his opinion on her revealing outfit. Arnest then remembered that they had moved up to the top-ranked class starting today, so they were not wearing their usual uniforms. Blade commented that Jessica's outfit must be making her feel cold. Trying to seek attention, Leonard introduced himself to Claire and Jessica. Later, Arnest also remembered the news that the headmaster brought demon beasts to the school. However, Blade considered it a normal piece of news. Suddenly, all the students felt a strong tremor coming from nearby. It was probably caused by the demon beast they had just talked about. The demon beast that shook the school turned out to be a golden yellow dragon. The guards panicked and immediately called for the headmaster, as they believed only he could fight the dragon. Blade went to where the dragon was, holding a plate of curry in his hand. Fearlessly, Blade approached and jumped, knocking the dragon on the head to make it quiet. Other students were left speechless watching Blade defeat the dragon barehanded. Blade mentioned that the dragon was just a child and probably scared because it was brought here. He even offered his curry to the dragon. Blade then realized that the other students found it unbelievable that he could defeat the dragon. While still in confusion, the dragon behind Blade suddenly emitted a bright light and transformed into a human child. When Blade turned around, he was suddenly hugged by the child who called him father. Blade was unaware that the dragon had transformed into this child. Arnest kept telling him that the dragon had transformed, but Blade didn't believe it until Sophie said the same thing, which made him trust her instantly. Arnest got annoyed because Blade only believed it when Sophie said it. The child kept calling Blade father and asked to be hugged. He said he called Blade that way because his punch earlier was incredibly powerful. That night, Blade and the child were bathing together. The child informed Blade that her name was Chu Hullen and she wanted to know the meaning of that name. Blade replied that it was the name of a very strong warrior who always kept his promises. Shortly after, Arnest's voice was heard as she suddenly entered. She was embarrassed to see Blade bathing. She came to provide information about demon beasts, especially dragons. They were a species that sought power. When defeated, their bodies would perish, but a part of their soul wouldn't disappear. Instead, it would become a piece of information. Then, that soul would transform into another individual and mimic the appearance of the creature that defeated them. Blade began to understand why Chu transformed into a human child. Arnest learned that the child's name was Chu. Suddenly, Chu emerged from the curtain, revealing her naked body to Arnest. Arnest couldn't believe that Blade was bathing with a child, and she immediately kicked him in the face with all her strength. The next day, Arnest was still annoyed by Chu, who continuously stuck to Blade. Chu wanted Blade to feed her curry. She said she could eat on her own, but the food given directly by her father would taste much better. Not only that, Chu also informed Blade that every morning he should greet her with kisses. Later, Blade and the others were in the top-ranked class arena. Coincidentally, Blade saw Chu passing by, so he invited her to join the training. Chu happily approached him. Suddenly, Kasim, Clay, Claire, and Jessica approached Blade. They said the teacher gave an order to form groups. Since they had just entered the top-ranked class, they wanted to know more details about it first. Chu looked a bit down as she was no longer getting attention from Blade. Jessica mentioned that she specialized in espionage, so she asked for student recommendations to form a group. Blade suggested her to team up with Sophie, and the other three decided to group up with Blade. When Blade wanted to invite Chu to join as well, he realized Chu was no longer there. In the evening, Chu was walking around the school alone. She then saw the students from the lower-ranked class practicing. Those students noticed Chu coming again for the umpteenth time and invited her to join the practice too. However, Chu didn't respond and considered them unsuitable for her. She immediately ran off and coincidentally bumped into Blade. Chu said she was hungry. As usual, Blade invited her to have some curry. After eating to her heart's content, Chu fell asleep on Blade's bed while holding a doll. Then, Arnest knocked on the door of Blade's room, so they decided to talk outside. Blade explained that a dragon would be stepped on by its parents when it was born. If someone stronger than the dragon appeared, it would be considered as the dragon's parent. Since Chu considered Blade as her parent, she must have been alone since birth. Blade knew that they couldn't always act like a father and child, but if it wasn't like that, Chu would truly be alone. Arnest understood how heavy it was to always be alone, and she also understood Blade's feelings of wanting to take care of Chu. Arnest then called Sophie, who had been eavesdropping on them, and Sophie felt worried too. However, after listening to their conversation, she seemed to be calmer. When Blade returned to his room, Chu was no longer there, and the window was open. He finally found Chu daydreaming on the room's rooftop. Chu said she felt calm when looking at the moon. There were 2 moons in this world, one big and one small. Chu considered the big moon as her parent and the small one as her child. She always looked at that moon when she was still alone. Suddenly, Blade asked if Chu wanted to have friends. But Chu said that dragons didn't need to gather like humans. The next day, Blade went to the headmaster's office. Previously, he left Chu for a while in the care of the headmaster. It might not be the proper place, but only Blade and the headmaster could take care of Chu. However, Chu was not there at the moment. While taking care of Chu, the headmaster kept rubbing his head, which annoyed Chu because his beard poked her. Until evening, Blade still couldn't find Chu. When he wanted to enter his room, he heard Chu's voice from inside. Blade tried to peek a little, and he saw Chu playing with dolls. Upon closer inspection, 2 dolls she held resembled him and Arnest. But it wasn't just the 2 of them. Chu also had dolls of Sophie, Claire, Jessica, and even Leonard. What surprised Blade was that Chu also had dolls of students she didn't even know. Chu was acting with her dolls as if she had 108 friends. Blade then closed the door and stopped spying. He felt like he had failed because he didn't realize it earlier. When he passed by Arnest, Blade didn't respond and just walked with a gloomy expression. Suddenly, Blade slammed his head against the wall. Arnest didn't know what happened, but she tried to stop him. After calming Blade down, she asked for an explanation. Blade then revealed that Chu wanted to have friends, but his instinct was against it. A dragon couldn't acknowledge a creature weaker than itself. To be recognized as Chu's friend, the person had to defeat her first. Blade felt utterly useless. Arnest also understood that Blade couldn't do it alone, he should have asked for help from others. After all, Blade was willing to help Arnest before, so why didn't he seek help in return? Arnest felt it was unfair. The next day, Blade and Arnest went to the lower ranked class arena. Blade wanted to ask for their help to defeat Chu in a fight. At first, they were unsure if they could win against a dragon. However, Blade begged them, even prostrated himself, to become Chu's friend. Arnest also joined in pleading. Surprisingly, not only them, but all the students from the top-ranked class also came and begged for their help. Like Blade, they also cared for Chu. Seeing so many people pleading and prostrating themselves, the students from the lower-ranked class felt uneasy and finally decided to help. Some time later, all the students gathered in the arena to face Chu. Even the headmaster would be there to witness the battle from above the arena. He seemed very excited because he also wanted to have real training like that. However, his wife was doubtful if a dragon would admit defeat when fighting against so many humans. According to the headmaster, dragons considered humans as creatures that exerted their power in groups. For him, fighting in a group was not considered cowardly. The dragon thought the same way. Although the headmaster was enthusiastic about the fight, he was a little disappointed because he wouldn't see Blade in action. Of course, Blade wouldn't participate in the battle since he had already defeated Chu. Before the fight began, Blade tried to encourage Chu. He heard that Chu was trapped when captured before, so she didn't have a chance to fight properly. But this time, it was a fair fight. Blade wanted to show the true power of humans and also the true power of dragons. This is the end of episode 3. Continuing to episode 4, as the battle began, most of the students immediately ran away upon seeing Chu's fiery explosion. However, Arnest scolded them to maintain the special formation as planned. This reinvigorated their spirits upon hearing Arnest's words. The forces led by Clay and Kasim converged to create a defensive formation with shields to counter Chu. When Chu attempted to attack one of the forces with his tail, they dispersed to avoid the assault, but this left Chu's rear vulnerable, giving the other force an opportunity to strike. So far, everything was going exactly like their training. The headmaster, observing the battle, was also impressed with their strategy of exploiting Chu's blind spot. However, defeating a dragon wasn't going to be as simple as that. Chu's scales were impervious to ordinary attacks. For now, their priority was to heal the injured students. Meanwhile, the attacking forces waited for the right moment to make their move against Chu. When the opportunity arose, Sophie leapt towards Chu to strike his head, while Arnest used her sword to unleash a fiery attack. Although the attack seemed to have some effect, it was uncertain if it would be enough to defeat Chu. As it turned out, Arnest's recent attack was not their main objective. Due to the smoke from the flames, Chu was unable to see his surroundings clearly, and suddenly, the ground beneath him collapsed as he tried to move. They had set a trap for him. The headmaster doubted Blade's intention to show a fair fight. Blade argued that it would indeed be unfair if the trap was set before the battle began. However, the trap was created right after the battle commenced. Throughout the fight, the other students were merely buying time for Leonard to dig the trap quickly. Nonetheless, the headmaster wasn't convinced that such a plan alone could lead them to victory. Blade understood this, and from this point on, the real battle would begin. The healed students now launched another attack on Chu. Meanwhile, for some reason, Asmodeus within Arnest's sword seemed to be struggling to continuously release flames. Nevertheless, Arnest paid no heed and forced Asmodeus to keep producing the flames. Chu then attempted to escape from the trap, but Arnest blocked his path with the forcibly unleashed fire from Asmodeus. Due to Arnest's attack, Chu fell from the sky. Sophie seized the opportunity to use her created hero power of gravity manipulation to further strike him down with force. Finally, Arnest would finish him off with her finishing blow. However, this attack was not solely Arnest's doing. The other students channeled their magic energy to strengthen her. Not only the top-ranking students but also those from lower ranks did the same. They shared the same feelings, wanting to become Chu's friends. The tremendous and powerful flames were directed by Arnest towards Chu, leaving him no chance to evade. After being hit by the attack, Chu reverted to his human form. He appeared somewhat sad for losing and felt that he had disappointed Blade by being a weak child. However, Blade certainly didn't see it that way. Chu's words weren't true, it wasn't Chu who was weak, but humans were stronger. With that, Chu finally acknowledged that they were stronger. This meant that now they could be his friends. Initially, Chu had arrogantly tried to befriend them to cover up his embarrassment, but after Blade's admonition, Chu sincerely wished to be friends with them. The next day, the headmaster was overseeing the construction of new facilities in the arena. He was pleased with the students' progress and wanted to prepare combat training that simulated real-life conditions. Using the lost magical knowledge called science, he planned to create a virtual reality facility. Meanwhile, Chu was having a meal with Blade and their friends. Claire was feeding Chu, playfully teasing her. During the meal, Blade noticed a change in Arnest. Somehow, Arnest had become chubby. The others had already noticed it, but they didn't mention it directly. Blade, on the other hand, bluntly called her chubby without considering Arnest's feelings. Arnest felt embarrassed and ran away from the cafeteria. Blade couldn't understand why the others thought he was being mean. They said that maybe Arnest had dumped Blade. Since then, Arnest had locked herself in her room for 3 days. Blade was visibly distressed about the situation, interpreting dumped as Arnest not wanting to be friends anymore. Jessica worsened the situation by saying that dumped actually meant Arnest no longer wanted to be friends with Blade. Hearing this, Blade panicked. He still wanted to be Arnest's friend and planned to apologize. However, Claire believed that Blade didn't know why Arnest was angry with him, and if he apologized without understanding the reason, Arnest might get even more upset. So, Claire, Jessica, and Sophie decided to accompany him to Arnest's room. Chu and Leonard joined them as well. When they arrived at Arnest's door, Jessica tried knocking and informed her that Blade came to apologize. But they received no response. Reluctantly, Jessica used a lockpick to force open the door. Once inside, they heard Arnest crying in the dimly lit room. They turned on the lights and saw Arnest devouring donuts greedily. Arnest explained that she had been feeling extremely hungry since her battle with Chu the other day. That was the first time she tried donuts, and she had been addicted ever since. Blade, still worried, asked if Arnest had dumped him, but it turned out that was not her intention. She just didn't want to show her body like this to him. Blade felt relieved to know he wasn't dumped. Rather carelessly, he decided to leave as if all the problems were solved. Claire and Jessica tried to encourage Blade to at least say something encouraging to Arnest. However, Blade, not fully understanding the situation, praised the deliciousness of the donuts. In this situation, Claire and Jessica handed it over to Leonard to set an example. Despite Leonard's well-put words, Arnest was still upset because he called her chubby. Blade made another attempt, advising that the issue could be resolved with the help of their friends. Blade planned to train Arnest's body back to its slim form. The next day, they started with a morning run. Right from the start, Arnest struggled to keep up. Nevertheless, she persisted, hoping to burn calories. They followed it up with squats, pull-ups, and push-ups. During the lunch break, Claire and Jessica prepared a special diet meal for Arnest, consisting of half a boiled egg, a slice of meat, and 2 broccoli pieces. Arnest needed to cut down on her calorie intake. After all the exercises, Arnest took a hot shower and then weighed herself. Unfortunately, her weight didn't decrease. However, she had been training to gain muscle mass, and soon she might start losing weight. The next day, Arnest had an extreme idea. To be safe, they carried it out in a new training area with strong magic barriers, so there would be no damage if the plan failed. Blade accompanied her as a precaution, and if everything went as planned, Arnest asked him to praise her. With that, Arnest began chanting a spell to awaken the power of Asmodeus. A fire tornado engulfed her, and slowly, Arnest's body began to slim down. Sophie, Chu, Claire, and Jessica rushed to the scene, concerned about the massive flames. They wanted to save Arnest, but Blade urged them to trust her. Shortly after, Arnest regained control. However, she now had horns and some fire-related attributes on her body. Suddenly, Asmodeus spoke through her. He was proud that Arnest could achieve this form. Previously, only first-generation users could accomplish it. The destroyed parts of Arnest's body transformed into fire, empowered by Asmodeus. Her body became immortal and impervious to physical attacks. Asmodeus was eager to find enemies to burn with its power. However, Arnest replied that the fire was better used to burn her fat. She did it as part of her diet to burn calories. Though feeling her dignity had been trampled upon, Asmodeus couldn't deny the truth. The weakness of the demon form was its high energy consumption. To sustain this form, 1 million calories per hour were needed. Arnest was delighted because she no longer needed to exercise every day to burn calories. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and collapsed. It turned out Arnest was just hungry. She was so famished that even in her demon form, she became unruly and even grew a tail. Claire tried to encourage her not to lose herself in the demon form. Surprisingly, Arnest could still remember Claire's name. Not only that, Arnest wanted to eat Claire because she looked delicious. Arnest started approaching Claire on her hands and feet. In such a situation, Blade had no choice but to use some force. He unleashed the 3-sword dragon vanish technique, the wind version, to revert Arnest to her original form. When she woke up, Arnest found herself naked and being carried by Blade. As promised, Blade praised her for successfully executing her plan. That night, Blade, Sophie, Claire, Jessica, and Leonard visited Arnest's room to check on her condition. To their surprise, they found Arnest devouring donuts in a brutal manner. Blade had somewhat expected this. Arnest tried to convince them to let her eat the donuts, as she would slim down again after using her demon form. However, they regarded it as an excuse of someone who was lazy. Arnest still insisted on sticking to her method. This is the end of episode 4. Continuing to episode 5, Nurse Ukes is examining Blade's condition. The results are fairly decent, around 30%. Blade asks if it means he can use his powers at around 30%. As it turns out, no, it means Blade is likely to die if he uses his powers at 30%. After the examination, Claire summons Blade while he's walking through the school hallway. Besides Claire, there's a fair-haired girl wearing glasses. Her name is Maria. Blade actually remembers the girl. Maria was on the magic team when they fought against Chu. He remembers that Maria often stumbled during practice and produced peculiar fireballs. Unbeknownst to Blade, he had caused Maria to lose her confidence. Worse yet, Blade referred to her as a clumsy kid. Setting that aside, Maria seems to want to ask for Blade's help. And unexpectedly, Maria asks Blade to kill her. Maria is currently taken to the cafeteria to explain the deeper meaning of her request. Apparently, Maria wants Blade to kill her when she can't control herself. In reality, Maria is not human. Blade had suspected that Maria is a night demon. Within Maria, there's a fearsomely powerful demon, a separate entity from her. This entity appeared once when Maria was in a difficult situation. Suddenly, the teacup she was holding shattered. That's what happens if she misjudges her strength. Until now, Maria had been able to control it, but since the battle against Chu, she's been struggling. Blade theorizes that her demon's power will surge uncontrollably when she's highly spirited in combat. In other words, if left unchecked, a demon will manifest from within her. However, Maria has no place other than this academy. Maria graduated from Rosewood Middle School, just like Claire. She doesn't know her parents. She doesn't even have a home to return to. Therefore, Maria wants to overcome the power within her. Blade agrees to help her, understanding the feeling of not having parents. It's not just him, Sophie, Arnest, Claire, Jessica, Kasim, Clay, Leonard, and even Chu are willing to assist. Later in the afternoon, they all headed to the battle arena. Blade asked Claire and Jessica to infiltrate the control room to adjust the demon power-resistant walls to their maximum strength. This way, the power that Maria had been holding back could be fully unleashed. Nevertheless, Maria still hesitated to do it. Blade informed her that this method had proven successful with Arnest. Arnest herself convinced Maria to follow Blade's plan, even though she admitted it was a foolish plan. Blade and Arnest then playfully teased each other about their foolishness. Seeing their interaction, Maria decided to trust her friends. Afterward, Maria removed the seals from her right hand. With that one object, she could release half of her power. Then, she did the same with her left hand. Not only there, she also had the same objects on her right and left legs. Maria's current strength increased 16-fold. Lastly, she revealed a pendant she was wearing. She claimed it was her strongest seal. The pendant could weaken her to 1/10 of her power. If she removed the pendant, Maria would become 160 times stronger. As she removed it, Maria couldn't contain the entity that emerged from within her. The being before them resembled Maria, but had horns and a pair of wings. Its voice became deeper. It also bore a mark on its forehead. Blade recognized the mark as that of a demon king. Before long, Arnest transformed into her demon form and fought against Maria. Unfortunately, Arnest was easily tossed aside with a simple wave of Maria's hand. Leonard's attempted attack proved futile as well. Next, Sophie used her custom hero power, ultimate gravity, to bring Maria down. Sophie immediately fainted after exerting such immense power. However, this provided an opportunity for Chu to unleash a tremendously powerful fire. Yet, Maria absorbed the fire and redirected it back at Chu. Finally, only Blade remained. At first, Blade attacked with an unsheathed sword. However, it seemed he couldn't win unless he took the fight seriously. When Blade unsheathed his sword and attacked Maria, the sword wasn't strong enough and almost cracked. Maria retaliated, emitting a laser as hot as the sun. Blade managed to withstand it, but the sword he was using ended up shattered. Unsteadily, Arnest urged Blade to use his sword, Asmodeus. With that, Blade decided to end the battle in a single strike. He gathered such immense power that even Asmodeus wasn't sure if it could contain it. The slash from Blade's attack had an extraordinary effect. Maria hadn't anticipated her protector cracking, and she was ultimately defeated by the strike. After using that final attack, Blade felt his body weaken and suddenly he lost consciousness. Once Blade had regained consciousness, he found himself in the school's infirmary. The nurse was deeply concerned about him. Blade had briefly died, and had the treatment been delayed even a bit, he might not have been saved. Seeing the nurse so distraught, Blade promised not to push himself that hard again. Meanwhile, the other friends weren't severely injured, including Maria. However, there was one notable difference: Maria still retained her demonic form. When she encountered Blade, she referred to him as a hero, which raised his suspicions about her true nature. Blade quickly tried to hush her and asked her not to discuss it. Suddenly, he revealed that Maria and himself were different people. He didn't even know his own name, as he had never been given one. Yet, other students who met him called him Mao. Afterwards, Blade and his friends went to the principal's office seeking an explanation. It turned out that he was the one who brought Maria to the academy. He also knew her true identity. Maria's mother was a human who had unfortunately passed away. As for her father, the principal was unsure if he was still alive or not, but he knew who he was, the Demon King. This meant that Maria was the child of the Demon King. After absorbing this information, they encountered Mao, who was chatting with other students in the garden. They were a bit concerned about letting Mao roam freely. However, Mao mentioned that he was interested in attending school. As the bell rang, Mao left for class. After Mao left, Claire asked why Maria hadn't appeared again, and only Mao was present. She worried that she might never be able to meet Maria again. During the night, Blade heard a knocking sound on his window. As expected, Mao was waiting outside. He mentioned that he wanted to take Blade on a date, having heard about it from his classmates. Blade was still uncertain, but suddenly, Mao lifted Blade into the air. Curious, Blade inquired about Mao's age. He felt that Mao seemed to lack a lot of knowledge. Mao responded that he became aware of his existence 5 years ago. However, for demons, age isn't relevant. Furthermore, as a woman, she disliked being treated like a child. Nevertheless, Blade still didn't see her as a woman, even though Mao was obsessively infatuated with him. He couldn't understand why Mao was so fixated on him. What's clear is that Mao had decided to leave once she killed Blade. Additionally, Mao informed Blade that she couldn't simply remove her pendant. Within her, there was the consciousness of Maria who resisted. Maria was currently hiding in the depths of her heart. Within her heart was a whirlpool of darkness. Since childhood, she had been shunned and hated by humans. She continued to hide and survive with just her mother. Her mother believed in her father, but not Maria. When her mother passed away, Maria's heart shattered with doubt. She questioned her father's love for her mother and blamed her suffering on him. Thus, Mao was born as a way to escape all those painful emotions. A few days later, a short bespectacled girl informed them that she had looked into the information about Maria's pendant. Apparently, the pendant wasn't an item for sealing. Either way, the girl's name was Eliza. Despite that, Mao felt that her power was restricted by the pendant. Eliza hadn't fully analyzed it, but she speculated that the pendant might function as a recording device. It could possibly contain a message from someone. According to Maria's memories, the item was a memento from her mother. Eliza mentioned that the recording held a message that could help Maria. In other words, a way to remove Mao, the Demon King. Following this, they decided to play the recording within the pendant. Claire felt that Mao didn't need to disappear to be replaced by Maria. However, Mao said that one of them was indeed destined to vanish. After Eliza prepared the pendant, Mao opened it to reveal a projection of her father, the Demon King. He conveyed a message to Amelia, Maria's mother. The Demon King apologized for leaving her and didn't mind being hated. He had a duty to fight his enemies, but he didn't want Amelia involved in bloodshed. Not for any particular reason, but he had his motives. Perhaps Amelia hadn't realized it, but the Demon King knew she was carrying his child. He had names prepared, whether it was a boy or a girl. If a boy, Orthus. If a girl, Maria. The Demon King asked Amelia to convey something when the child was capable of understanding. Tell them their father had passed away. The Demon King swore that he always loved Amelia and their future child. After the recording ended, Mao shed tears. She could no longer control her body. It seemed she was losing in the battle of souls. Mao had come to accept that she would be defeated by Maria. She requested them to call out Maria's name so she could return. Once called, the tearful figure before them was none other than Maria. At the end of the episode, it appeared that Blade was about to engage in a battle with Maria in the arena. Suddenly, Maria removed her glasses, and in an instant, her form transformed into Mao. It turned out that Mao's personality hadn't vanished. Perhaps because Maria wanted to coexist with her. Continuing on to episode 6, Blade, Chu, Arnest, and Sophie are strolling around the city together. Previously, Blade was surprised as it was his first time eating a pudding as large as a bucket. During their journey, they come across a carriage whose cargo cannot fit through the bridge passage. Arnest tries to advise the carriage owner to take the highway if it doesn't fit. The owner of the carriage is a blonde-haired female centaur named Dione. Blade seems to recognize Dione. Her name is Dione. Dione is surprised to see the hero here. However, before Dione can mention it, Blade stops her first to speak. He informs Dione that his identity as a hero must be kept secret. Arnest is surprised to find out that Blade knows Dione. He mentions that they are old friends. Setting that aside, they offer to help Dione if she's having trouble transporting her cargo. Apparently, the cargo needs to be delivered to the palace. In other words, to the king's or headmaster's location. Just as they finish their task, Dione is immediately given a new mission by the king. She is asked to become a teacher at Rosewood Academy. According to the king, with Dione's strength, there's no problem for her to become a teacher. After that, at Rosewood Academy, the upper and lower class students gathered in the arena. In front of them, Dione and some divine metal are seen. Dione then uses her spear to charge toward the divine metal. Her attack is so powerful that it creates a large circular penetration. In fact, the parts of the divine metal that aren't penetrated melt due to the immense strength. Normally, divine metal is indestructible. As a result, all the divine metal in the arena is obliterated due to Dione. Dione says that was her warm-up. Now she's ready to start the lesson. The students feel pressured witnessing Dione's actions. In fact, she hasn't even introduced herself as the new teacher yet. After being reminded, Dione finally introduces herself. She also reveals her title, which is Dione the Magic Spear. Somehow, Arnest seems to recognize that title. After some recollection, Dione the Magic Spear was a general who led the strongest army. The students can't believe that someone so powerful would be teaching at this academy. However, Dione remains humble, claiming she's nothing compared to the hero. Arnest becomes more puzzled about how someone as powerful as her could be acquainted with Blade. Claire and Jessica are also curious. On that night, Blade was bathing Chu in the men's bath. Meanwhile, in the women's bath, Claire and Jessica were scrubbing Dione's body, which was out of reach. They took this opportunity to inquire about her relationship with Blade. Feeling flustered, Dione explained that she had only recently met Blade for the first time. Arnest, who was also in the women's bath, remembered that earlier in the day, Dione had mentioned that Blade was an old friend of hers. Even Maria was curious about Blade's past. Feeling uneasy, Blade suddenly entered the women's bath area. Arnest, of course, panicked at Blade's presence. Jessica assured them that there's no need to worry about Blade, stating that his thinking is like that of a 5-year-old. To prove her point, Jessica even dropped her towel in front of Blade, and as expected, Blade didn't react at all. Dione then recalled that Blade had the same kind of reaction when they first met. When Blade tried to stop her, Maria suddenly transformed into Mao to hold him back. Dione began to recount the story. Initially, when Dione saw Blade's appearance, she thought he was a wild animal. Blade didn't say much and mistook Dione for a horse. He even bit Dione's rear end. Dione then showed the bite mark on her rear end from Blade. Several years later, Dione trained both physically and mentally. Eventually, she was able to fight alongside the hero. Sophie tried to reassure Blade, saying that no one realized the hero was Blade. Dione also boasted because she had been ridden by the hero. However, during the battle against the Demon King, Dione wasn't taken along. She couldn't accompany the hero until the end. At that time, Dione felt she wasn't strong enough. Hence, she continued her training. Meanwhile, Blade still remained skeptical of Sophie's words. Sophie herself was quite certain since people thought the hero was an older individual. Sophie stated that this matter was their secret. Unfortunately, Blade mentioned that there was one more person who knew, which was Mao. This sudden revelation upset Sophie. A few days later, Blade and Arnest were shopping together in the town, also buying something for Dione. Arnest was still curious about what the connection between Blade and Dione was. Suddenly, a simurgh flew over the city. Blade was unfamiliar with the creature. Arnest then explained that the simurgh was one of the 4 elemental birds. The only elemental birds that Blade knew were the thunderbird and the phoenix. Until now, there had been no records of simurgh attacking humans. However, for some reason, this simurgh descended and destroyed a carriage. After that, it flew away. They realized that there were actually 2 simurghs. Arnest was puzzled by why a simurgh would attack humans. However, Blade realized that the simurgh attacked the carriage, not humans. Blade had a hunch that the king might know something about this. Later in the evening, Arnest stormed into the headmaster's room with anger. She wanted to know what the king was hiding. The king asked why she accused him of being involved, and Blade explained that the simurgh attacked a cargo carriage. Blade realized that Dione had also brought cargo carriages to the royal palace before. So, they wanted to know what was in the king's carriage. With an innocent tone, the king said that it contained eggs, to be precise, simurgh eggs. He mentioned that he just wanted to borrow the eggs for a while. His wife then suggested that the king explain the situation. Reluctantly, he started explaining. To hatch simurgh eggs, there are 2 conditions that need to be met. First, the eggs must be at an elevation equivalent to a 10,000-year-old sacred tree. Second, the eggs must be bathed in the light of the setting sun. However, it seems that the simurgh they saw is making a nest for the first time. The nesting location is unfavorable, and if it stays that way, the eggs won't hatch. So, the king is actually trying to help the simurgh. He ordered them to assist the simurgh if they want to become heroes or surpass that. The next day, Blade and Arnest gathered other students to fight against the simurgh. The goal was not just to win, but to buy time until sunset. They needed to keep the simurgh away from its egg. Meanwhile, the egg would be taken up to the palace using an elevator. If the plan succeeded, the egg would hatch. With that in mind, they began executing their plan. They baited the simurgh using an empty carriage placed in an evacuated area. Most direct physical attacks didn't have much effect on the simurgh. However, Blade had an idea to overcome this. The students used divine metal traps to restrain the simurgh. The traps weren't unbreakable, but the objects used to hold the traps could be pulled by the simurgh, buying them more time. Next, Chu attacked one of the simurghs with her fire breath. However, the simurgh remained strong enough to withstand her flames. They also received help from Mao to fight against it. However, even after being attacked, the simurgh didn't surrender. Not stopping there, Arnest used her demon form to provide assistance. Until finally, evening arrived, and they only needed to transport the egg using the elevator. However, for some reason, the elevator stopped halfway. Unfortunately, one of the Simurgs realized that the egg was in the royal palace. The students present there asked Blade to go and take the egg to the top. They would handle the situation there. Seeing this, Blade was reminded of how his former companions, when they were heroes, had done something similar. After that, Blade quickly ran along the palace walls to retrieve the egg. As it turned out, even with just 15% of his strength, it was quite challenging for him. Coincidentally, Dione also ran along the wall to meet Blade. She asked him to get on her back. At that moment, Blade opened up about feeling the same way he did when he was a hero. His companions used to let him go ahead on his own. However, this time he wasn't alone. When he fought the Demon King, Blade did it all by himself. But now, he had many friends. Of course, Dione was one of them as well. Upon reaching the elevator, Blade felt that he couldn't carry the giant egg while running along the wall. Dione had an idea to address this. She would push Blade's back so that he could still carry the egg. Thus, they finally reached the top of the palace. There, the king was already waiting. Unfortunately, the other Simurgs still realized that its egg had been taken there. Nevertheless, the king instructed them to leave the rest to him. His wife explained that the king had been saved by a Simurg in the past. He had always been thinking about how to repay the favor. Despite his good intentions, the Simurg seemed angry. It threw the king, causing him to bounce off the egg. This nearly led to the egg falling if Blade hadn't caught it. Suddenly, Sophie arrived and used her created hero's power, specifically the power to stop time. Sophie could only hold it for 5 seconds, but that was enough for Blade. He then used his Dragon Eater towards the Simurg. The attack didn't kill it, but it bought them enough time for the egg to hatch. Finally, the awaited moment arrived, and the egg had hatched. It turned out that there were 2 baby Simurgs inside. No wonder the egg was heavy. A few days later, Blade and Arnest attempted to ride the 2 baby Simurgs. Their parents also seemed to have calmed down. In this way, Blade's circle of friends expanded once again. This is the end of episode 6.
In the school hallway, we see Blade, who is holding a bloodied sword. Previously, he had taken down several students from the top-ranking class. Now Sophie stands before him, ready to confront him. Sophie expresses her desire for a serious duel with Blade. She believes she can win if she unleashes her full strength. Without hesitation, Sophie activates her artificial hero power, the ability to stop time. She proceeds to strike Blade at his vital points. After time resumes, Sophie appears extremely exhausted from using this power. However, Blade shows no signs of pain or fatigue. As it turns out, just before Sophie stopped time, Blade employed his Vajra body technique, which temporarily hardens his body. But because time was frozen, his body remained in that hardened state. Blade then corners Sophie and thrusts his sword into her chest. After all these tragic battles, Blade suddenly screams, calling out to the headmaster. Behind Blade, a projection of the headmaster's face appears. The headmaster had explained earlier that this is a lost magic called science. More precisely, they are using virtual reality. Unlike the real world, they can continuously use sharp swords without worrying about damage. So the headmaster wants to see the students train as if it were real until only one remains. They enter the virtual reality world by attaching a device to their heads. If they lose in virtual reality, they will wake up in the real world. However, Blade protests because it's too difficult to distinguish between the real world and virtual reality. There's a possibility of someone misunderstanding the two and ending up killing their friend in the real world. The headmaster shares this concern and eventually transforms the virtual reality setting into a candy-created world. The headmaster proceeds with the students' battles, allowing the last one standing to use virtual reality as they please. Leonard encountered Arnest and expressed a desire to spar with her. However, Arnest appeared ferocious and mercilessly struck Leonard down. She seemed like a crazed individual who enjoyed killing. After defeating Leonard, she continued on her journey to find Blade. Meanwhile, Blade was observing the battle between Clay and Cassim against Claire and Jessica. Initially, Clay and Cassim seemed to have the upper hand. When they were still in the lower-ranked class, Clay and Cassim consistently defeated them. However, Claire and Jessica believed they had grown stronger and could win now. Jessica then asked why Clay and Cassim refused to lose to them. Both of them hesitated to respond, avoiding eye contact. Seizing the opportunity, Jessica swiftly attacked and struck Cassim with her fan weapon. Clay panicked as Cassim was defeated. While Clay was momentarily distracted, Claire wasted no time in hitting him with her Morningstar weapon. For the first time, Claire and Jessica emerged victorious against Clay and Cassim. Not long after that, both of them were startled by the appearance of Arnest. Arnest realized that Blade was nearby. She confessed to finding satisfaction in killing people. Although in a different context, Blade had previously promised to kill Arnest if she went mad. Arnest immediately sprinted toward Blade while chuckling. As for Blade, he simply swung his sword, creating a powerful gust of wind that sent Arnest, Claire, and Jessica flying. Afterward, Blade woke up in the real world, and for some reason, the other students were giving him strange looks. Of course, the last one standing was Blade. Arnest had also awakened and felt ashamed of her violent behavior in virtual reality. The headmaster praised himself for coming up with this training method, but it left the students in shock and suffering. Suddenly, Blade approached the headmaster to tamper with the virtual reality control device. As per the headmaster's words, the last survivor indeed had the right to use it as they pleased. Blade inputted data for fierce demon beasts to populate his world. He also added traps to the floor. The headmaster wasn't sure if Blade could handle it all alone, but Blade wasn't doing it for himself. He took a virtual reality cable and plugged it into the headmaster. Blade asked the headmaster's wife to set it up so that he could dine and respawn endlessly until nightfall. Meanwhile, Clay and Cassim looked gloomy after their fight with Claire and Jessica earlier. As usual, Blade devoured his curry with great enthusiasm. Clay and Cassim remained despondent, refusing even to sit with the others. Arnest asked what happened, and Blade explained that they lost to Claire and Jessica. Blade elaborated that Claire had made rapid progress and Jessica's deceptive attacks had thrown them off. In contrast, Clay and Cassim lost because they were too arrogant about their own strength and often skipped lessons. Those words might have hit Clay and Cassim hard, but Blade said them for their own good. Currently, Blade and his friends are heading towards a certain place. He's carrying a pamphlet about a hot spring bathhouse built by the headmaster. When they arrive there, they meet Dione, who is helping with the construction. According to the pamphlet, this place is called Therma. However, Blade doesn't know what it means. Out of nowhere, Alisa arrives to explain. She explains and invites Blade and the others to enter the bathhouse. Even Dione joins them. The bathhouse is co-ed, but the women are still wearing swimsuits. All the students from the top-ranked class join the bathhouse, but Blade doesn't see Arnest. Just as she's mentioned, Arnest suddenly appears. Arnest is too embarrassed to enter the mixed bath, so she wears a towel over her swimsuit. In contrast to Arnest, the headmaster suddenly arrives completely naked. He says the concept of thermi is to enter naked. Arnest objects because it's a mixed bath. The headmaster can't argue, but he still refuses to use a towel. Somehow, the headmaster becomes very enthusiastic, saying he wants to see the girls naked. If not, at least he wants to see them in swimsuits. The girls look at the headmaster with disgust. The headmaster is sure the guys here feel the same way. Jessica also tells Arnest to just go with it. After all, the other girls aren't using towels either. Suddenly, the headmaster's wife smacks him because he's being too irritating. Although the headmaster has left, Arnest still reluctantly takes off her towel. After that, Claire and Jessica approached Clay and Cassim, who had been alone all this time. Claire wanted Clay and Cassim not to dwell on the fight earlier in the afternoon. Claire said maybe they won because of luck. Nevertheless, Clay and Cassim still wanted to reflect on how weak they were. Without considering their feelings, Claire said that Clay and Cassim were much stronger. In other words, they lost to someone weaker. To make matters worse, Claire apologized for winning. Clay and Cassim immediately ran away, crying. That night, Blade came to see Clay and Cassim to cheer them up. However, they said that Blade would never understand their feelings. Besides, Blade never lost to a woman, let alone anyone else. Clay revealed that he didn't mind losing to others, he just didn't want to lose to Jessica. He also confessed that he actually liked Jessica. Similarly, Cassim had feelings for Claire. Innocently, Blade said that he also liked Claire and Jessica, along with their other friends. At first, Clay and Cassim panicked, but it turned out that Blade's liking was different from theirs. Suddenly, Q entered through the window. She said the solution to their problem was simple. They just needed to become stronger because females liked strong males. Strangely, Clay and Cassim agreed with her statement. Q then told them to train with Blade to become stronger. On the other hand, the girls were gathered in a room, eating cake. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss Clay and Cassim. Since then, the two of them always left when Claire and Jessica wanted to talk to them. They were confused about what to do. Once again, Q came in through the window. However, this time she said that males liked strong females. However, Claire and Jessica had no desire to make Clay and Cassim like them. Claire then had an idea to skip training so that Clay and Cassim could catch up with their abilities. However, Arnest opposed this idea. She said she had a better idea. The next day, Clay and Cassim were rigorously trained by Blade. Eventually, it was time for them to practice using virtual reality again. If Clay and Cassim won this match, they would reveal their feelings to Claire and Jessica. Arnest overheard these words before entering the virtual world. It turned out that Arnest's idea was to have a rematch between Clay and Cassim against Claire and Jessica in virtual reality. Meanwhile, other students entered the virtual world as spectators. Shortly after that, the match began. Claire and Jessica were surprised because Clay and Cassim could perform fighting spirit techniques. Blade had helped them realize their potential during training. Cassim was now skilled in using wind magic, but it wasn't just them who improved. Jessica suddenly unleashed fire magic. It was undoubtedly Arnest who taught her. And unexpectedly, Claire could also use fighting spirit techniques. Cassim was defeated due to her attack. Not only that, Jessica used ice magic to freeze Clay, then attacked him with lightning magic. Finally, she finished off Clay with her fan. Back in the real world, Clay and Cassim admitted defeat to Claire and Jessica. They thanked them for the earnest battle. Although they lost, Clay and Cassim were confident that they had become stronger, as were Claire and Jessica.
One day, the girls encountered a robot on the academy grounds. According to Sophie, the robot had been here for about a week now. But Arnest hadn't noticed it until now. She became curious about who had brought the robot to the academy. Suddenly, the robot displayed a projection of Blade's image. Meanwhile, Hu Chulin arrived unexpectedly and disrupted Blade, who was currently training his fighting spirit techniques as if in meditation. Given the warning that unleashing more than 15% of his power would result in his death, Blade focused on honing his combat spirit to conserve energy. Shortly thereafter, the girls brought the robot they had found to Blade. As soon as Blade laid eyes on the robot, he unleashed the Dragon Eater without hesitation, causing the robot to shatter into pieces. Arnest was understandably furious at Blade for attacking the defenseless robot so abruptly. However, Blade regarded the robot as a threat. He explained that it was a guardian, a creature that would regenerate no matter how many times it was destroyed. While Blade and Arnest argued, they remained unaware that the robot was still functioning and analyzing Arnest's body. The next day, the previously shattered robot had miraculously repaired itself and now possessed a body resembling that of a woman. Suddenly, she approached Blade and inquired about her body. She had analyzed the thoughts of men and updated her appearance with a design that would make men want to protect her. Blade still did not realize that the girl in front of him was the Guardian from the previous day. As the Guardian attempted to attack, Blade quickly became aware and once again summoned the Dragon Eater, shattering the arena walls with each strike. Despite Arnest's scolding, Blade felt no pity, as he knew the Guardian would surely regenerate. True enough, by evening, the Guardian was waiting in the arena. Arnest immediately stopped Blade from trying to destroy her once more, sensing no threatening aura from the Guardian. She believed the Guardian might just want to be friends. However, Blade remained skeptical and viewed the Guardian as dangerous, especially if she were to become a berserker. The Guardian then revealed that she had received orders to eliminate Blade. Suddenly, Claire invited the Guardian to study together. The Guardian refused, stating that cooperation was not within her programming. Claire remained steadfast, suggesting they simply learn how to cooperate. Claire even instantly referred to her as Ima. On the Guardian's clothing, there was an inscription 10NA, which was said to be an identification number and model, not a name. Since the Guardian lacked a name, Claire saw no issue with giving her one. The other friends were impressed by Claire's determination. Not only that, but Claire even proposed that they all brainstorm ways to defeat Blade. Eventually, Iona agreed to Claire's suggestion. Currently, they are in the classroom to discuss this matter, with Eliza also present. First and foremost, they want to understand why Iona wants to destroy Blade. She responds that it's because Blade forcefully entered her domain and violated her multiple times. Blade immediately refutes Iona's seemingly ambiguous statement. In fact, Blade only entered the area guarded by Iona, and at the time, he had borrowed the master key from the headmaster. However, Iona insists that it's not enough. There are still biometric codes and biological signatures required. Arnest is puzzled about the location they're referring to. Blade then explains that underground, around here, there's a royal library that stores forbidden books. He had sought information about Asmodeus there. Arnest feels embarrassed upon hearing this. Blade did all of this to save himself. However, Iona claims that Blade had infiltrated 13 times before that. Then Iona had been destroyed 28 times. Her body was shattered into 577,526 pieces. Subsequently, reprimands from superiors arrived within 500,037,000 milliseconds. Blade defends himself by saying that Iona attacked first. His friends, however, remain impartial, and eventually, Blade sulks and leaves. Sophie chases after Blade, who is walking away in a sulk. Blade is not pleased to be called a library intruder when he was only doing his duty as a hero. Sophie understands this. Furthermore, the Guardian's soul resides elsewhere, so no matter how many times she's destroyed, it doesn't bother her. Sophie then asks what if the Guardian truly dies when she's destroyed. Of course, Blade would be concerned. Meanwhile, Eliza is explaining why Iona can't win against Blade. In essence, Blade shows no mercy to Iona because he knows she won't die no matter how many times she's destroyed, so they must first think of a way to make her unbeatable. Iona has already considered this, which involves transforming her body into that of a woman. From their observations, Blade is reluctant to harm women. Eliza thinks of a strategy, naming it the standalone complex. Simply put, Iona needs to install the soul in her main unit into her current unit. This way, she becomes vulnerable to destruction. In that state, Blade should hesitate to destroy her again. The next day, they immediately held a duel in the arena, watched by many students. As planned, before the duel began, Iona informed everyone that she was currently in standalone mode. This meant her body was directly connected to her main unit, allowing her to move freely. If she were destroyed now, she wouldn't be able to regenerate. Iona suddenly directed Blade's hand to her chest to show that her vulnerability was located there. 10 centimeters inside, her soul resided. If seriously injured, her personality would disappear forever. Afterward, Iona initiated their fight. Blade had been receiving attacks all along and hadn't counterattacked. When Blade endured a particularly painful blow, he wanted to retaliate with the Dragon Eater. However, he recalled Iona's earlier statement. Blade immediately abandoned the Dragon Eater and only released air from both his hands. Unfortunately, the attack wasn't powerful enough to defeat Iona. In the end, Blade continued to be relentlessly attacked until he could no longer fight back. Blade couldn't counterattack because his offensive power was too strong. Also, Iona couldn't be defeated with just small attacks. Thus, Blade surrendered at Iona's request. The audience cheered as it was the first time Blade had lost in combat. Iona seemed fascinated by the cheers of others. Afterward, they all rested in the cafeteria. Iona appeared to have no appetite for food, or perhaps she simply had no need to eat. However, Iona explained that she had the ability to absorb and break down organic matter into energy. So Arnest concluded that Iona indeed had no appetite. Claire suggested that Iona should just inform them if there were any problems on her mind. After all, Iona was their friend. Typically, decisions were made by the main unit in this situation. Once the task was completed, it was reported to the main unit for the next assignment. However, for some reason, the main unit had been continuously rejecting her. Despite her connection being restored, it seemed that due to Iona's actions, she was considered a defective unit and her registration was revoked. With no superior anymore, her condition became unstable. Iona then asked Blade to become her master. If Blade refused, her countdown would continue. After a Guardian was disconnected from its main unit, there was a self-destruct program to prevent the unit from becoming a berserker. The entire cafeteria was shocked upon hearing this. There were 303,751 seconds, or 84 hours, remaining. With no other options, Blade decided to become Iona's master. As Blade relaxed in the school courtyard, Iona approached while wearing a maid outfit. Blade was puzzled by Iona's behavior. She said she would take off the outfit if Blade ordered her to, but Blade hesitated to do so. Iona interpreted this hesitation as an order to keep the outfit on. Suddenly, Sophie appeared with an annoyed expression, upset that Blade had given Iona an order but not her. Blade pleaded with them not to argue and create problems. In response, they both asked if it was an order. Later, in the school hallway, Blade encountered Sophie again, who was wearing cat ear accessories. She mentioned that she might be able to surpass Iona by developing her character. Surprisingly, Iona had the same idea and was wearing rabbit ear accessories. They continued to compete to determine who deserved Blade's orders. Eventually, Iona said she believed they didn't need to compete anymore. Previously, Iona was always alone, with Blade being the only one who approached her. Similarly, Sophie was always alone in the experimental room, but she felt a connection as a simulation of Blade. Thanks to Blade, Sophie felt connected to the world. They both saw each other as special, similar figures. Blade, pretending to be asleep, smiled as he listened to their conversation. The next day, Iona greeted Sophie, who was having lunch in the cafeteria. However, Blade became suspicious upon hearing a strange sound from Iona. He asked Iona to show her countdown, and it turned out her countdown was still running with 7,000 seconds remaining. However, the countdown was now 10 times slower than before. Iona expressed her desire to be with everyone until the last second. Following her request, the students threw a lively party for her. Strangely, Blade was absent during the celebration. Arnest and the others searched the entire school area, but couldn't find him. Now, Iona had only 60 seconds left. In the arena, she created a barrier around herself to prevent others from being affected by the explosion. For the first time as she faced her imminent death, Iona felt like she understood humans. With only 5 seconds left, Iona suddenly confessed that she was actually scared. She didn't want to disappear. She wanted to be saved. As she was about to vanish, she asked the others not to forget her. Just as there was only 1 second left, nothing happened to Iona's body. Suddenly, Blade emerged from the ground. When questioned by Arnest, Blade explained that he had gone to meet Iona's parent. He convinced them not to let Iona go. Blade also admitted to using a bit of force. It turned out that his connection with Iona's parent had been restored. With this, he had no reason to activate self-destruction. Iona immediately hugged Blade with tears of joy. Rosewood Academy is currently conducting a special training exercise in the form of a battle royale. This exercise should have been a unique opportunity for students to showcase their learning outcomes by competing against each other. However, all the students have been individually defeated by Blade, except for one, Leonard. He is determined to win using the absolute defense of his spear drill. The other students are rallying behind Leonard, hoping he can avenge their defeats. As usual, Leonard promises his victory to Arnest, but she seems indifferent and asks why he hasn't been defeated yet. Arnest's words shatter Leonard's confidence instantly. Jessica worsens the situation by suggesting that Blade is the type of person who saves the worst for last, implying that he enjoys consuming unpleasant things at the end. Despite these remarks, Leonard remains determined to defeat Blade and charges forward with all his might. However, Blade effortlessly dodges his attacks, leaving the other students disappointed, as they had already anticipated this outcome. During the night, Leonard reflects on his battles with Blade. He acknowledges Blade's formidable strength, but believes that if he can defeat Blade, Arnest might start paying attention to him. The following day, Leonard is relaxing in the academy garden when Maria approaches him and asks if he accepted defeat from Blade and is now taking it easy. Leonard chuckles and tells Maria that she doesn't understand what he's going through. Maria admits she doesn't know how it feels, but she emphasizes that she stands beside Blade, not behind him. Although Maria still cannot defeat Blade, she is confident that with her strength, she will stand alongside him one day. Leonard infers that Maria might have feelings for Blade, but she quickly denies it, comparing herself to Mao, who sees Blade as a rival. Leonard then stands up and asks Maria if she wants to kill Blade. Maria, of course, has no such intention, but Mao does. Mao genuinely wants to eliminate Blade. Upon hearing Maria's words, Leonard gains clarity and expresses gratitude for the encouragement he received. Suddenly, Eliza appears out of nowhere between them. She cannot bear to see them relying solely on psychological matters. While offering support and motivation is helpful, it won't be enough to defeat Blade, the superhuman. If they genuinely want to beat him, Eliza is willing to help, but not through psychological means. She has a concrete plan in mind. Afterward, the first meeting of the Superhuman Conquest Committee commenced. The other friends were also members of the committee, with Leonard serving as its chairman. He then delivered an opening speech for motivation. However, Arnest couldn't bear to listen to his rambling. Once again, Leonard's morale crumbled instantly because of it. Leonard then got straight to the heart of his speech. Everyone here had different feelings, but they shared the same goal: defeating Blade. However, Sophie mentioned that she didn't mind as long as Blade was happy. Hu Chulin was just going along with it. Setting that aside, Leonard then asked if anyone had a concrete plan to defeat Blade. Jessica suggested attacking him while he slept, while Claire recommended using poison. Arnest objected to such underhanded tactics, but Eliza argued that it wasn't cheating. In fact, Blade was the one who had been unfair from the beginning by becoming a superhuman. The other members agreed with Eliza's statement. As weak humans challenging a superhuman, they were allowed to use any means necessary. However, Arnest wanted to do it fairly. She pointed out that Blade could only use a sword, so she proposed challenging him with a weapon he didn't master. Claire retorted that it wasn't much different from poisoning him or attacking while he slept. Leonard tried to defend Arnest by saying that her intention was for everyone to challenge Blade in their own way. Arnest immediately pretended that was indeed her intention. They then began brainstorming various methods to defeat Blade. The first one to challenge Blade was Arnest. She challenged Blade to a spear duel using Leonard's spear, while Blade used a regular spear. As Arnest began the spirit clash, it was Leonard's spear that broke against Blade's ordinary one. Next up was Jessica. As she had mentioned, Jessica aimed to attack Blade while he slept. She successfully infiltrated Blade's room at night, but for some reason, Iona, another committee member, activated her laser to attack Blade. She claimed it was an automatic feature. Then it was Leonard's turn to challenge. Just like Arnest, he challenged Blade to a spear duel, but this time he also used a shield. However, as soon as he activated his spear, he was suddenly caught in an explosion from his own weapon. It turned out that the spear, which had been damaged when used by Arnest, had been hastily patched up and ended up damaged again. Following that, Mariette attempted to attack Blade when he was off guard in the cafeteria. She passed the task to Mao. Unfortunately, Mao was too talkative and ended up losing before launching an attack. Next was Sophie's turn. She challenged Blade to a bare-handed duel, but Blade quickly defeated her by landing a direct hit on her face with his hand. During the committee meeting, Sophie inexplicably mentioned again that she didn't mind as long as Blade was happy. Claire, on the other hand, failed immediately as she tripped over Blade when attempting to attack him. Lastly, it was Kasim and Clay's turn. They engaged in a sword fight as usual. However, Kasim and Clay had a plan to distract Blade by pretending to point out a woman in the distance. Unfortunately, this tactic had no effect on Blade whatsoever. Now, the other committee members wanted to try different methods. Arnest even tried a suit, but somehow, Blade still emerged victorious. Arnest then challenged him to endurance tests involving extreme heat and cold, but none of these attempts yielded any results. During the committee meeting, Arnest was truly frustrated by her inability to win. She wanted to defeat Blade by any means necessary and be recognized as strong by him. Leonard responded by saying that recognition wasn't only about winning but also about the real value of their efforts. Despite his words, Arnest remained indifferent and just wanted to win once and for all. She couldn't stand having to make the Gaifen sound repeatedly. Suddenly, Iona explained that Gaiathan in an ancient language meant surrender. Iona suggested that this method might work because during her duel with Blade, she had managed to make him surrender. At that time, Iona had offered her own life as a hostage, so they needed to have a hostage to defeat Blade. The next day, the plan was set to be executed during the medical class, taught by the school nurse. Blade was curious why Leonard, Cassim, and Clay weren't attending this class. Jessica made up an excuse, saying that the three of them had some business to attend to. Suddenly, the classroom door was forcibly opened by three masked men. Yes, they were indeed Leonard, Cassim, and Clay. They pretended to be terrorists. Sophie explained that terrorists were a group that used violence to achieve political goals. They took the school nurse hostage and explained what they were doing. Meanwhile, the uninvolved students were instructed to leave the classroom. Initially, Blade also wanted to leave, but he was stopped by Arnest. She emphasized that there were hostages taken by the terrorists. After hearing the situation, the school nurse also cooperated and pretended to ask for help from Blade. The other girls immediately wanted to be taken hostage as well. They wanted Blade to rescue them. After a lengthy argument, the school nurse left the classroom to let the others become hostages. Despite all this, Blade remained unfazed. He even asked Ku Chulain about the meaning of hostages. Ku Chulain clearly didn't know and casually replied with preserved food. Arnest couldn't stand Blade's ignorance and mocked him. Even though his life was in danger, Blade refused to help. However, Blade was still puzzled by the connection between terrorists committing violence and preserved food. After that, Blade even asked why Leonard, Cassim, and Clay were wearing animal masks. They didn't expect Blade to have figured it out. As it turned out, Blade mentioned that he knew from the beginning based on the way they walked. He asked why they chose to make the girls hostages. They were surprised when Blade considered it not just an act. Cassim then replied that they wanted to turn them into preserved food. Blade even believed their words and advised against it. It seemed like this strategy was effective. However, Cassim got too cocky and dared to touch Arnest and Claire's chests, which resulted in him getting beaten up instead. Nevertheless, Leonard and Clay still asked Blade to surrender. Leonard hinted that Blade would surrender just like during his duel with Iona back then. However, Blade said that the circumstances were different from that time. Leonard tried to prove that Blade was helpless by threatening to cut Arnest's throat. Even when the others forced him to surrender, Blade still refused. He then swung his sword slowly, which tore apart the clothes of Leonard, Cassim, and Clay, and destroyed their weapons as well. Now Arnest couldn't take it anymore. She transformed herself into her demon form. Not only her, but also the others were determined to confront Blade once more. Unfortunately, all of it was in vain. Once again, they were all soundly defeated by Blade. They surrendered and admitted that they had just pretended to be terrorists. Blade considered this as child's play. Blade didn't actually know because he had never played children's games before. In the end, the committee members held their 334th meeting. Leonard still refused to surrender until they achieved results. The same went for Arnest. However, Eliza had resigned herself and suggested that they should just surrender. Leonard remained unfazed. He asked Arnest to hold his hand and fight together once more. However, Arnest's current focus was on making Blade cry and praise her for being strong. Once again, Leonard's morale was shattered by her words.